Being deeply interested in film and a love for history, these two combined when I was thinking about Native American history in film and how indigenous people are misrepresented.
We must know more about these visitors. Kinkata, what do you see?
I have always had an interest in Native Americans being in film, as I am indigenous myself. I come from the reservation of Santa Clara Pueblo in northern New Mexico, one of 19 Pueblo nations. I attended the Santa Fe Indian School, and during my junior year, I had a video productions class. From that moment on, I had gained a love for films. Me and a group of students created many films, from the Western cowboy genre
Well, would you look at that?
to horror movie slashers. I then dipped my foot into watching more movies after my junior year, continuously watching movie after movie. However, something was never right, specifically in the Western genre and older films. We see how Native Americans in old Western movies were one-faced characters, an endless horde of cannon fodder for the white cowboy hero. Why did these stereotypes and tropes occur in older films? Why were Native Americans not casted for Native roles, instead played by non-natives in brownface? And how do Native people currently stand in the film industry? We will dive into the history of why in search to answer all of these questions. Now, indigenous people of the Americas have been the original inhabitants of the land. Before the arrival of European colonizers, the Americas were populated by diverse groups of people. Each of these groups had their own unique culture, language, and characteristics. Many tribes relied on hunting and nomadic lifestyles, such as the Navajos, Sioux, and Cheyenne. Other groups farmed and created permanent settlements like the Puebloans. These tribes are vastly different in lifestyles and cultures. Even in Central America, as the Mayans excelled in math, building an empire, the Aztecs built great cities in present-day Mexico, and in the Andes, the Inca and Moche civilization left monuments. But in 1492, peace was stirred as Christopher Columbus stumbled upon the Americas, setting off a wave of European exploration, conquest, and colonization. The Spanish conquistadors arrived on the route to finding a path to India. What followed was a period of invasion, disease, and displacement, as European powers sought to exploit the land and resources of the New World. This brought devastation to indigenous tribes, with millions dying from disease brought by the colonizers, and countless others displaced or enslaved. The clash of cultures and the conquest for power would reshape the Americas forever, marking the history of indigenous people permanently. The establishment of the United States in 1776 marked a new chapter. Westward expansion accelerated, driven by events like the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, and the Oregon Trail migrations in the 1840s. Indigenous people were misplaced and massacred in conflicts such as the Trail of Tears in the 1830s, where indigenous people were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands, and the Wounded Knee Massacre in 1890, which further marked this era known as the American Indian Wars. This caused displacement and decimation of indigenous communities across the continent. In 1851, Congress created reservations for Native Americans. These people were forcefully moved, restricting them from their traditions and culture. This secured taken land for European colonizers. As the 20th century dawned, Native American communities continued to grapple with the repercussions of forced displacement and cultural suppression. We see this with the American Indian boarding schools for civilizing Native peoples. This was forced assimilation. This era also witnessed significant advancements in technology, particularly in the realm of photography and filmmaking. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, innovations in cameras and film revolutionized visual storytelling. People like Edward S. Curtis began projects to document the cultures of Native American tribes. Curtis's work, The North American Indian, contained vast collections of photographs. Though this was out of the myth that Native Americans were vanishing, this also romanticized Native American people. The introduction of film further transformed the representation of Native Americans in early movies. Since early silent films, indigenous peoples were often depicted in stereotypical and romanticized lens, continuing harmful stereotypes and reinforcing colonial narratives. These films frequently portray Native Americans as either noble savages or menacing adversaries, reflecting prevailing attitudes of the time. Movies like The Great Train Robbery and Last of the Mohicans expanded romanticized notions of Native American culture, while largely sidelining indigenous perspectives.
They're sort of cast off to the side, played by other people who aren't really them. And it creates this legacy of misrepresentation and misuse of your own image, and it sort of uses your own image against you.
Some early filmmakers attempted to provide more humane portrayals of Native Americans. In 1914, Cecil B. DeMille collaborated with members of the Blackfeet Nation to produce The Squaw Man, a Western genre that depicted Native Americans with greater depth and humanity. As the mid-20th century arrived, Hollywood experienced a surge in Western films, with the 1950s and 1960s witnessing the genre's peak popularity. This is where you get Cowboys vs. Indians, or The Wagon Trail, John Wayne, train robberies. These movies often romanticized the American frontier and perpetuated stereotypes, including those of Native Americans. Indigenous characters were frequently kept to secondary roles, or portrayed as one-dimensional villains. Films like The Searchers, directed by John Ford and starring John Wayne, exemplified this trend. While praised for its cinematography and storytelling, this movie depicted Native Americans as savage and menacing.
Let's go! Let's
go! Despite these issues, some filmmakers challenged prevailing stereotypes and offered more authentic representation of Native Americans. Directors like Arthur Penn with Little Big Men.
Hello, grandfather.
Greetings, my son. Do you want to eat?
We were always in front of the camera, right? Not as a lead character, but more of like a supporting or a background per se.
Practices known as redface or brownface, where non-native actors don on makeup to assume roles of native characters, has persisted, perpetuating harmful stereotypes and misrepresentations. This practice, though once deemed acceptable within the industry, now stands as a testament to its historical disregard for cultural authenticity and respect. Indigenous stories were distorted, their complexities reduced to crude distortions for the sake of entertainment.
Overall, while the Western genre provided a platform for storytelling, it also perpetuated harmful stereotypes and misrepresented Native American cultures. It wasn't until later in the 20th century that indigenous filmmakers and actors began to reclaim their narratives. As the late 1960s and 1970s unfolded, the American counterculture movement gained momentum, challenging established norms and advocating for social change. The rise of the American Indian movement in the 1960s and 1970s brought attention to issues of Native American sovereignty, land rights, and self-determination. The late 20th century also saw significant legislative developments aimed at protecting Native American rights and religious freedoms. The American Indian Religious Freedom Act of 1978 recognized the importance of traditional indigenous practices and sought to safeguard them from the government. This activism resonated in the film industry, inspiring works that highlighted indigenous resistance and resilience. Filmmakers increasingly explored themes of cultural identity, activism, and resilience, offering more sympathetic portrayals of Native American characters. This was known in the Western genre as the revisionist era. Revisionist Westerns often depicted indigenous peoples in a more sympathetic light, acknowledging their perspective and agency in the face of colonization and westward expansion. While challenges and misrepresentation persisted, particularly in Hollywood's tendency to cast non-native actors in native roles, The late 20th century marked a significant shift towards more authentic and respectful portrayals of indigenous people in film. As we entered the 1990s and moved into modern times, there was a noticeable increase in the presence of influential Native American filmmakers, actors, producers, writers, and other creatives in the film and television industry. This shift marked a departure from earlier eras where indigenous voices were often marginalized or misrepresented. Indigenous filmmakers like Chris Eyre, whose groundbreaking film Smoke Signals garnered critical acclaim, challenging stereotypes and reclaiming narratives.
Talked about that fire every day. He cried about it. He wished he could have changed it. He wished he hadn't run away. But you have to remember one thing, Victor. He ran back into that burning house looking for you.
The turn of the 21st century brought further momentum to indigenous film movement, with a growing number of Native American filmmakers producing works that reflect their community's realities and aspirations. With greater opportunities for Native American representation both in front of and behind the camera, film and television shows began to explore a wider range of indigenous experiences and perspectives, fostering greater authenticity and cultural sensitivity in portrayals of Native American characters and stories. In the present day, we are witnessing a renaissance of Native American storytelling across various media platforms. Television shows like Raz Dogs and Dark Winds have garnered praise for their authentic depictions of contemporary indigenous life, while films like Killers of the Flower Moon, based on David Granham's book, promise to shed light on lesser-known chapters of Native American history. These works not only provide opportunities for indigenous filmmakers and actors to share their story, but also challenge audiences to confront the complexities of Native American experiences and history.
You see a lot of natives behind the camera as well as in front of the camera, a whole native cast and crew. But being able to tell our own stories now, you know, we have that permission. We can tell it how we wanted to. We have phones, we have access to cameras now.
The identity and who they are is incredibly important to them and to that story specifically, but they are also just people with issues. Like their identity is not solely that they're indigenous. And I think that is something that we need more of.
And buried us as we march.
With each new product, the landscape of Native American representation in film and television continues to evolve, offering hope for a future where indigenous voices are heard and respected on the screen and beyond.
Native youth are becoming increasingly aware of representation by watching films, recognizing the significance of accurate portrayal. Contributing to the changing landscape of Native Americans in film involves listening to Native Americans and engaging with their content, acknowledging it as the best way to support Indigenous communities. To further this cause, I've taken action by offering lessons to fellow Native peoples on filmmaking, drawing from my own challenges and experiences in the field. I've crafted a slide presentation which I shared with my family, and upon completing a video project, I intend to share it widely to raise awareness about the misrepresentation of Native Americans in film.
Alright, okay. Now, when I initially started creating this film, I had no idea what I wanted to make. I mean, of course, I wanted to make a film about Native Americans in film and a whole history stuff. But, my direction was very aimless and I had no idea what I was doing a lot. But luckily for me, people like Miss Meira, Dr. Grimley, Aiden Gray, Tim, Anna, my parents, Mr. Dwayne Joe, Windigoon, just came in and helped me so much. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. This experience was truly amazing to have. And until next time. Okay, now how do I stop the recording?